It is good to be back, everyone. Not gonna lie, I missed this. The whole frame analysis thing, it's just something that I love. I love going and diving into a frame's kit, seeing what they can do, feeling them out, trying to make some funky builds as we saw with Atlas, while also trying to teach, which we saw with pretty much everything that I've put onto this channel, and that brings me to why we're doing this again. I have found that I learn the best while I myself am trying to teach. I've figured this out when it comes to work. I've figured it out when it comes to school. And I have figured it out when it comes to video games. I am an amazing coach and a horrible student. I do not learn well from anyone but myself. And I learn a lot whenever I try to teach. So, today's target is Jade. We're going to be going over her pros, her cons, strengths, weaknesses, valleys, as well as peaks. But something that I want to talk about beforehand. Jade is what I would consider a jack of all trades frame. So, to start off, let's compare her against another jack of all trades frame, Wisp. Wisp is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of, if not the best jack of all trades frames that this game has ever seen. So stacking her up against Wisp is a little rude, but the sad part is she actually does hold a candle to our little footless queen here. So Wisp's survivability is mainly in her moats. Most of her utility is in her moats, and it makes her an incredibly fun pick. In fact, after I was done getting the footage for this video, me and the person who is in the video with me went into the simulacrum just to see how high we could get Wisp's green moat. And I'm really sad that I stopped recording because it was some of, if not the most fun I've had playing this game, bar none. It was full of shenanigans, us making use of various different things to get my power strength unreasonably high, and it was a blast. But, anyway, that was a weird tangent. Wisp's survivability and her utility are in her moats. Jade's survivability is spread all throughout her kit. Her utility is in her 3. Her damage is in her 1, her 3, and her 4. So with that, how does she stack up to the literal god of everything that is Wisp? I would say on a scale of Banshee to Wisp, she is about a Zaku. Really, really good at certain things, but not quite as good as Wisp is at everything. Let's start off by taking a look at her passive. Jade's passive is one of the longer ones, and by that I mean it's a fucking paragraph. So, in essence, this jumble of words here can be summarized by saying Jade gets 2 aura mod slots and can apply judgment with some of her abilities, and all judgment does is increase enemy vulnerability by 50% for 10 seconds. This is fine. 2 aura mod slots is actually really cool. She gets it because she allegedly understands life and death really well, and that's cool and all. But I would like to point you all to the forgotten love child of DE known as Equinox. Equinox hasn't been in the best place for a little while now, and Equinox, to get baseline, requires you to farm 2 separate full frame sets, then fuse them together. I think that the double passive thing could have gone to Equinox, and it actually makes a lot more sense on Equinox than it does on Jade. But outside of that, this is a perfectly fine ability. Nothing really bad here, nothing offensive. Again, I wish it had gone to Equinox and maybe given her a passive that is more like, while you have no shields, you gain DR. When you take health damage, instead you gain bonus damage for each percent of health mixing. 5% of your health is a 1% damage increase, and it will stack up to 10 times. So at 50% health, you'll gain 10% damage increase. Nothing crazy, but still would have been nice to see, instead of they get 2 aura slots because they understand life and death real good. Her first ability is Light's Judgment, where she creates a wall of light that heals allies, hurts enemies, and applies judgment to all enemies. You can have a max of these bad boys of 5, which means that this is your main coverage ability to apply judgment, which is amazing setup for not only your 4, but also your 2, as we will get into when we get into that ability. The heal off of Light's Judgment is kind of subpar. You can't really compare it to anything else. It is significantly weaker than Wisp Motes. It's significantly weaker than Titania. The damage on it isn't half bad, not gonna lie. It's better than most 1 abilities on frames get if you compare it to the Slice on Gara or the Fireball on Ember. It's actually a really good ability when compared to other frames' first ability. Next, we have Symphony of Mercy, which is a rotational ability, granting 1 of 3 effects depending which of these you have highlighted. Power of the 7 grants ability strength, Deathbringer grants weapon damage increase, and Spirit of Resilience grants shield recharge rate and decrease shield recharge delay. What that means is your shields will recharge at a steady rate no matter what. If your shields were to get knocked out to 0, the delay between that and when your shields start recharging is decreased. This is a really good survivability tool. Shields are notoriously subpar the higher you get in enemy levels, with the big muscle mommy standing over there as an exception. Shields are kind of subpar. Generally speaking, a lot of people like to build health. People love health armor builds. It's just kind of the nature of endgame right now. But this isn't the worst thing, and it's actually something when we get to the building phase that I have been able to capitalize on to keep her alive. In the background, you'll be seeing me do a survival mott in Steel Path. Her third ability is called Ophanim Eyes. They gaze upon enemies, dissolving their shields and their armor. Then, once their shields or armor are empty, they get burned for a little bit of heat damage. You can also aim these eyes at a downed ally and revive them from a distance. This is a really cool shred ability mixed with the revive. I absolutely love this ability. The revive is a little niche, so to say. If I have the footage, I will put it right here of me going to revive someone and them just reviving on their own. It doesn't give you an increase to your revive speed. It just lets you revive essentially without coming out of your 4, which is really important because her 4 is kind of what ties her whole kit together. We've mentioned Symphony of Mercy giving her ability strength, and Deathbringer giving her weapon damage, then Spirit of Resilience granting her shield recharge rate. And when we get to her 4, you will understand that actually you need to cycle between all those. I mentioned how Judgment is good setup for her 4. Once again, when we get to it, you'll understand that her 4 kind of is the glue holding her entire kit together. So this is essentially just a way of them being like, hey, you don't need to get out of your 4 to revive people. Just have this ability active and look at them and they'll get rezzed. It's a nice touch, but honestly, it feels kind of wonky to use, not gonna lie. I wish it was you could look at an ally and then cast it and it would instantly revive them. I think that would just be more convenient. Yes, you're trading off your energy, but like if you're looking at an ally, have it cost like half as much or something like that. I feel like that would be a better way to do it than just looking at them and they get revived. because, like I said, it doesn't increase how fast you revive people. You just revive people by looking at them instead of going to pick them up. On to the aptly named Glory on High. This is Jade's fourth ability, making her take flight and take up her exalted weapon, Glory. It's a secondary weapon that has an explosive shot that has a chance to apply Judgment, 10% chance, and when she alt fires, she will detonate Judgment, dealing 10 times her weapon shot damage to anyone affected by Judgment. And if they are standing inside of your light's Judgment, that will empower the damage and range further. While you are in Glory on High, you gain 50% DR, which does not scale, but it is DR while you are in flight, which is really important once we get to the build segment. You are in flight the entire time you are in this ability. This ability makes me feel like Titania off of Temu. The flight controls are really kind of mid, honestly. I'm used to Arcwing style controls, so when we were given this ability and I first used it, it was very jarring trying to adapt, especially since I'm so used to playing Titania, because that's pretty much all I play nowadays. But once you get used to the wonky flight controls, much like Miralina, you will actually really enjoy this frame. When it came to Ureli, a lot of people hated riding Miralina around, then they got used to it, and now they're perfectly fine with it. I can almost guarantee that a lot of people are going to pick up Jade, not really like the flight mechanics, get used to it, really love the frame. The frame as a whole is amazing. Her 4 tying her whole kit in together, just absolutely phenomenal. But I've been going on and on about this build, so what are we looking at here? Well, we are running Pistol Amp and Dreamer's Bond, as they have access to 2 aura slots. Pistol Amp, given that the primary source of a lot of her damage is Glory, we're going to be looking at that. And then we're running Dreamer's Bond, because I haven't had a chance to form her to add a better aura like Corrosive Projection. But something to note, her aura slots, you can't really see it here because it shows both our proper polarity, because Dreamer's Bond is a universal. But the aura slot on the left is universal, and the one on the right is Nevariin, which means that if you want to do this setup, this is actually where you need to have those mods, is Pistol Amp left, Dreamer's Bond right. The reason is because a universal slot or mod will always be proper polarity. So you don't have to worry about putting a Nevariin in a Martyr Eye and things like that. As for the build itself, we have a pretty standard build: Fleeting Expertise, Prime Continuity, Streamline, Constitution, and Flow. Those are all quite standard for anyone who has a Drain ability. You want respectable duration, relatively high efficiency, and a fair bit of energy so you're not starving yourself. The Umbral Intensify is to amplify how fast the armor gets shredded with Ophinum Eyes, to amplify the damage on Glory on High, to amplify the damage of Light's Judgment, to amplify the buffs given from Symphony of Mercy. Ability strength is important, but it is not it's not worth a Blind Rage level importance, because you put on Blind Rage, you're knocking your efficiency by a fair marker, and even though, yes, it is a much bigger increase than Umbral Intensify is, I put on Umbral Intensify there because it's a bigger increase than Standard Intensify, and I don't have a Primed Intensify. I don't know if anyone does. I don't even know if that mod actually exists right now. But if it does, I don't have it. Is what it is. Adaptation, it's a survivability mod. You kind of need to have it on just about any frame you're hoping to survive in Steel Path with. That's just kind of standard also. But Boreal's Hatred. This is where the shields matter and being in flight matters. Boreal's Hatred is a unique mod, which increases your shield capacity and ability efficiency, which are both things that we relatively care about, but the most important thing is it reduces damage by 20% while you are airborne. So damage you would be taking while you are airborne is reduced by 20%. So while you are in flight, while you are in your 4, which is going to be 90% of the time, you take reduced damage. I also run this mod on Titania because it's super useful for her as well. But any frame who takes flight is going to make use of Boreal's Hatred. I don't have the other Boreal mods. If I did, I would probably run them just to get that decrease even higher. But again, it's stacking decreases. So, you know, you have your adaptation, you have your Boreal's Hatred, you have the DR from Glory on High, which, by the way, earlier I said it doesn't scale with power strength, that it's just locked at 50. It's not locked at 50. It does scale with power strength, but getting it to 50 is not hard. It's baseline 35. I'm also just seeing that now as I am literally looking at the ability. And I misspoke earlier in the script. And I'm just too lazy to go back and edit that. But yeah, the build, generally speaking, is what we have on screen. This works very well. But something to note is I don't have a defensive Arcane. That is because I don't own a defensive Arcane. I'm currently working on getting Arcane Guardian. And I want to get Arcane Energize. Both would be, you know, really good for me. But right now, instead, I'm running Arcane Battery and Molt Augmented. These are two fairly solid augments. Arcane Battery, you get a ton of while you're doing the event to try and get Jade. And also, it allows some versatility in this build, because if you want to drop the flow, or say you want to drop adaptation and you want to put on Umbral Fiber, you can. That will give you increased armor, which will give you increased energy. And if you choose to drop adaptation for it, yeah, you lose that damage, but you're also gaining some power strength and you're gaining some armor. And you could also then drop flow to pick up a 10 space mod, such as, you know, like a Cunning Drift or a Natural Talent or a Power Drift, something like that. You could even grab a Fortitude if you're really feeling feisty with the shields. There's just it opens up build diversity. It's just something that you should keep in mind whenever you are theory crafting, is to try and keep build diversity as open as possible. Final notes on Jade. Great frame, absolute blast to play. Does definitely have a bit of a learning curve to her, but not as steep as some other frames are. If you like frames that fly around the map and frames that are kind of always busy, and by always busy, I mean they're always doing something. If you look at, you know, for example, I like to play Titania. Titania is always busy. There's never really a time you're just standing around doing nothing on Titania. I also enjoy playing Zaku. Yes, Zaku has the whole play the game for you button, but you're never just standing there. You're constantly moving. You're pulling more guns, refreshing your durations. You're doing something. I don't like frames like Octavia because they're frames where you just kind of stand around and do nothing. Nothing against that playstyle. It's just not for me. This frame, however, is a blast. I recommend any intermediate or veteran grinding this up. I would not recommend beginners do it, because at the time of recording, and I'm going to double check just so I don't look stupid. Yes, the Ascension mission required is level 45-50 Corpus, which can be a little bit difficult for some people to do early on. So if you're early on enough and you don't think that that's something that you want to invest time in and clear, and you would rather focus on other objectives, that is perfectly fine. Jade is good, clearly, late game, mid game, early game. She's just good everywhere. I would like to thank you all for watching. Hopefully I will see you on the next one, where hopefully I get to go over Corvex, because our little cement man needs some love.